Welcome back to the Authenticity Calling podcast. I am your host, Relitza Spasova, and I am so grateful to have with me today Angela Orr. And Angela is a certified transformation mentor and coach, and she is also known as the pill-less pharmacist. She utilizes her knowledge about the science of transformation to help women make permanent change to live their fullest life. She's a certified heart math practitioner, stress and well-being assessment provider, executive mentor, Psych K facilitator, certified EFT and TFT provider, published author, speaker, and pharmacist of 39 years. Angela, I am so grateful to have you on the podcast. You
I'm
are
grateful to be here.
such a gift in this world. And I can just see that you are a deeply rooted healer from the core, from the beginning of your life. And yeah, when we connected yesterday, very briefly, but so magically, I just was blown away by the pivot you've made in your life and how powerful and important it is for you. So I would just love to hear more about your journey from you, and just if you can share with our audience your inspiration, your the driving force behind this massive, it's a big shift.
Thank you so much. And it was fabulous to talk with you yesterday. It has been a big shift, and people say the pill-less pharmacist. What do you mean by that? So I'll go through that today. Let me just start with I'm very grateful to be here and to share this message with your audience and my audience. I feel like the more that we can get information out there into the hands of people that we serve or would like to serve, the more that we can help to raise consciousness in the world, which is really, I think, what people are looking for. You know, the status quo, especially after the last couple of years, is just not cutting it. And our
Absolutely.
healthcare, our healthcare is just, is sick care. And it's like, how do we get back to healthcare where we take
Yeah.
care of health first?
Yes,
And then if that doesn't work, it goes into sick care.
that's
And
right.
that's why I consider myself the pillless pharmacist, is what can we do before we add pills on to help people with those emotions and feelings and things that then turn into chronic diseases.
That's right.
So before we get into that, I've been a pharmacist, as we've said, 39 years. I know started when I was in kindergarten.
That's right.
But good living, I feel like, helps to maintain your looks. Um, and in 2012, 13, 14, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Mm.
I owned two pharmacies at the time here in Maine. So I owned two pharmacies in Maine for a total of 15 years. I looked like I had everything, friends, family. I traveled. I did a lot with the independent pharmacy associations and things. Stress was literally killing me.
Yeah.
I was overeating, which has been, an issue that I'm really now conquering, which is really awesome.
Mm.
But I also overindulged in alcohol, which I put down the alcohol 4 years ago. And yes, it was one of the best decisions of my life. It was actually 4 years ago this coming Thursday.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
I'll be doing
Oh,
a
yeah.
post about that. It's just amazing the difference that makes. And when I realized that stress was killing me, although my surgeon said I was an uninteresting case, which is a good time to be boring, but it was still serious. And life was never the same. And at that point, I thought, I have to do something different. So, of the two pharmacies, I sold one within the next year just to have the one in my local town, and not so much stress. And then I ended up selling that a couple of years later, right before the pandemic, to a local grocery store chain, and I still work for them part-time because I love being a pharmacist. I love what I do. I love serving, and I love how I pivoted. So with the journey that I took personally, I've always been into self-development. And I think what it was is I was always looking to fill some kind of void that I've had, or, just I didn't look at it necessarily as getting to the next level, but just fixing something.
Mm.
And as I have gone through the journey over these last years since my breast cancer and I pivoted, I found a lot of modalities that I now use in my coaching business. So I pivoted from this cancer diagnosis to, okay, how can I use this to help impact the world? Because I've always felt that I was made to impact and to impact the world. And that's how I pivoted into coaching or mentoring. I felt like, as a pharmacist of 30 whatever some years, I have a lot of coaching experience because we work with customers a lot, and you work with coaching and mentoring and helping people. So it was kind of a natural thing for me, and I went through certain certifications. So I became certified as a life coach. I'm certified as a heart math practitioner, certified practitioner. We can talk about heart math in a few minutes. I'm a certified heart math stress and well-being assessment provider. It's really neat that you can measure your amount of stress, but also your amount of well-being. It's good to have balance and look at both. And then I also am certified in EFT, TFT um, techniques, as well as a Psyche, which is another energy type of work. So, and I've been a contributing author in 2 books, and I also do speaking. I've been on multiple podcasts, and I am working on some corporate programs to really help corporations to change their culture. Because again, we know, especially in healthcare, well, in all industries, that the culture is really difficult right now. And, people need as much support and tools that we can give them to help to make it so much less stressful.
As possible. Absolutely. Yeah, I really see that in my corporate career. And everybody in the company that I work for, I think is a very conscious company compared to others. And even then, I just realize how much we all have on our desk, and everybody in corporate. It's not, one person more than another. And I think the more you move up the
Absolutely.
ladder, usually people delegate more. But I think in my line of work, because I work for a nonprofit organization, and it's really very there's a lot of change happening. There's a lot of work that we're doing. And so the higher you sort of evolve in your career, I can't even say move up, because I don't like this idea of a hierarchy, and we really don't work
Yeah.
that way. But just as long as when you parallel shift into taking more of a lead role, I think to me yeah, it's such an important part of our lives to take personal responsibility for our boundaries and our capacity,
Yes.
and for to be able to say no, and to be able to table things, and recognize, what is actually really necessary to respond to now, and what can wait till Monday, basically.
Yeah.
So that you're
Yep.
not up until 10, 11 o'clock at night on a Friday, trying to manage all the things. And I think, like, we talk about chronic inflammation and how that leads to disease, but people don't really, I still think they haven't connected the dots of stress leading to chronic inflammation. And I'm so glad that Deepak Chopra talks about it. And that's one of the mechanisms now that he talks about to reverse aging, which I think most people would just like, they'd be deer in the
Yeah.
headlights. They would absolutely not believe it, but it's true. And that's exactly what it is when we reduce the toxic experiences, which means removing or limiting relationships that cause us to feel stressed, to feel outside of ourselves, right? When we
Yeah.
reduce that need to respond, when we slow down in our
Yeah.
lives, when we connect with other people who are consciously doing the same thing, have the same
Yes.
values as us. That's why I love doing this, because it fills my heart and my soul with so much appreciation and calm and peace, just knowing that we are so interconnected in what
Yes.
we're doing and how we're doing it, that it's just, I don't know how people do it alone in their little boxes. I mean, we're made to be tribal, we're made to be connected and together, and it's just, I think there's a shift happening right now, and I can really feel the calling to be part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
it's just
I would absolutely agree with all of that. And what's so interesting as far as the cortisol and how that's connected to long-term disease, that's what I love about heart math. So if I can, I'm going to talk just a little bit about
absolutely,
heart math.
please, yeah.
So heart math is an organization out of Northern California, and they've been around for about 4 decades or so, and they really have studied the heart-brain connection. So, and what is interesting is we have over 400 published studies that show if you can become coherent in your heart, that you can actually change your chemistry, biology, and physiology. And that's what I love about transformation. The approach that I take is it's science-based. There are scientific studies and there's scientific proof of all of the things that I use as well as what I believe in. So with heart math, what some of the basic studies have shown is that when you're in an incoherent state. And what I mean by that is, we use negative and positive emotions, but with heart math, it's regenerative and depleting emotions. That's how we word it. Because the other words can be triggering sometimes for people. And if you think about it, if you're in a depleting state, that is
Mhm.
sadness, irritation, anger, frustration, hopelessness, what do? They deplete you. They deplete you of your
Mm.
joy. They deplete you of your energy, that type of thing. Whereas when you're in a regenerating feeling, such as joy, love, gratitude, you do feel regenerated. But what we have shown is that when people live consistently in those depleting emotions, and you couple that with the flight or fight,
Mhm.
which is where your autonomic nervous system is imbalanced,
Mhm.
then what happens is you get this overproduction as cortisol. As healthcare professionals, we know that
Mhm.
cortisol is very important and we have to have it. But what is harmful is when there's an out of balance. So when you have an overproduction consistently over a long period of time, leads to chronic inflammation, which I believe is the basis of so many, and it's actually in heart math in their science, you'll see that we believe that 80 to 90% of current doctor visits are due to inflammation
Yes,
and overproduction of cortisol because it can lead to heart disease, diabetes, so many different factors.
that's right.
If you can get your autonomic nervous system into a more balanced state, then what you can do is to decrease that cortisol, overproduction of cortisol,
Mhm.
um, and get into a more balanced state so that you are in a more homeostasis or more even. And it's obviously a much better way to live. But how do you do that?
That's right.
And, there's a lot of different ways to do that. But just realize that every thought that you have
Mhm.
is impactful,
Mhm.
good, bad, or indifferent.
That's right.
And so if we can switch that around, then we can really change, as I said, our physiology, biology, and chemistry.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I just wanted to plug in here. I talk a lot about when we talk about stress, I talk about the reptilian brain and how our that survival only takes over. And when you say stress is good for the humankind, yes, it's good if a saber-toothed tiger is chasing you, or like if there's a bear that you see in your yard and your child is closer to the bear, you obviously want to react quickly to that and get out of that really truly life-threatening situation. But what you said about our thoughts is so powerful and important. And I always go back to thinking about trauma, like when we talk about big T trauma, and people think that, oh, certain experiences equal big T trauma. And the truth of big T trauma is it's not about the actual experience, it's about how you hold it. That makes it a big T trauma. And to me, that really, and we haven't talked about this before, but to me, that equates to, are you actually doing those heart degenerating? No, what did you call it? Heart,
Regenerating.
the other one,
Oh,
the destructive one.
um, depleting. I'm
Depleting.
sorry.
Thank
All of a
you.
sudden, I'm
Yes.
like depleting,
It
deplete.
totally
They
like
deplete.
to me it's like a bomb is exploding. Like
Yeah,
depleting to be
depleting.
gentle. Yeah, when you say depleting, to me it's like you are wreaking havoc. Like you are causing war in your physical body, in your mind, but also in your spiritual. And we don't really talk about spirituality so much. I think especially in healthcare, like we are
Yes.
ignorant at best. That's that's how I like to say we don't talk about spirituality at all, but it is so important because I think for a lot of people, and I'm not talking about one specific religion, but just to have a spiritual practice, whether that's meditation, whether that's taking time out, whether that's, reading books to get you into alignment with yourself. I talk a lot about
Yep.
alignment, but
Yep.
even in religion, these are places that you go to, a lot of people go to have their sins forgiven, to get rid of that shame and blame and guilt, and to have, a sense of community and to be tribal again, which is what we're meant
Mhm.
to be, which is very
Yeah.
healing.
Yeah.
And so the more I learn about sort of, especially doing work in truth and reconciliation, every single conversation that I have with people is it's so like, to me, my heart just settles, my soul feels so aligned with meeting each other, heart centered first. That is the truth of what we're trying to do here. It's not about our human doing all the time. It's about first being. And the more we connect with each other, the more we can actually support one another. And when that collaboration happens, that's when magic happens. Like, we're able to bring our
Absolutely.
gifts. And that, I think, to me is so healing and so powerful. And literally will extend our lives based on what you're saying, which is just like science says
It
all the
will.
things. Yeah,
Yeah. Frequency first.
that's right.
Frequency first.
I
It
love that.
because if you don't have that frequency that is in alignment, then it's hard to connect. Going back to what you were saying as far as, so I love Dr. Bruce Lipton, and he is the pioneer, or considered one of the pioneers of epigenetics. And as far as our thoughts and our internal chemistry, what's really interesting is, so he's the forefather of epigenetics. And people are like, what is epigenetics? So we all have genes,
Yes,
and genes turn on and off, and that's what causes different. So genes are protein producing machines in our body, and what causes diseases or not is by those genes turning on or off incorrectly. This is a very, very simplified explanation. It's much more scientific, but for purposes of today, let me just expound on this. But what's interesting is what we have found is that genes turn on or off by a variety of things. But it's the environment. So it's
that's
the
right.
environment that turns a gene on and off. So the environment consists of what you eat, what you drink, physical trauma, um, chemical trauma, such as toxin, this and that. But the biggest producer of turning genes on or off are our thoughts. And this again is scientifically proven, but it's not really even our thoughts. It's what you were talking about. It is our perception of thought.
That's right.
So you can see something one way and I can see it another. So
That's
it's the perception of it. And the perception of the situation is what can turn on or off those genes. And that's exactly what drugs do. So drugs turn genes on or off. So
right.
we have all these chemicals in our body naturally, and that's and so we can produce like the chemicals that are not good for us, like the cortisol and things, and turn things on and off, not the way that our body's meant to be, or we can have chemicals produce like oxytocin, which is the love,
That's right.
it again, very simplified, but so it internally making those chemical changes can be done thought based,
That's
which
right.
is really, so your thoughts, like I said before, really matter. And, so when you see a saber tooth or a bear in your yard, of course you
Mhm.
are going to have thoughts like, okay, I've got to get my kid, and you do the fight or flight. And unfortunately, in today's world, that never turns off because your boss is the bear,
That's right.
coworkers are the saber-toothed tiger. So we live in this world where we're always in that stress mode that really gets us in that fight or flight. So we're always fighting, fleeing, that palpitation, like you got to go here and there and next. And so to really come back home to yourself, as I said earlier, I was always looking for a way to fix me or to fill that hole. And
Mhm.
what I realize now is that it's really just coming back to home to yourself.
I love that. Oh, I love that. That's it. Even on my website, I said, welcome home. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
It's really coming back, and that's so easy as a concept and so hard to do
Hmm. By yourself.
by
I think,
yourself.
I think
Yeah.
it's because we're so accustomed to doing things the way we do them. And, you talk about epigenetics, and I love epigenetics. I'm like, as soon as I started learning about epigenetics, I just, my mind finally fell in sync with my heart. That's literally what it felt like, because I knew something was wrong. And I feel like we could talk forever if we get nerdy with it. Like, I used to teach biochemistry. I feel like we can go into all the ways, all the things
We
that
could get very nerdy.
yeah, in biochemistry, like I used to wonder, if this is true, then why do we do things this way pharmacologically, or why do we do things this way in the way that we treat and heal? And it's just, there's so many things that we could go into, but yeah, I just want to highlight that the patterns that we have are our neural programming that we pick up. It's literally mirroring. We mirror what we see, what growing up. And so if we see toxic habits and patterns, toxic ways of dealing with others, relationships, we mirror those things. And the older that we get, the I think the more pruning happens
Yeah.
on the ways that we've learned throughout our lives. And that's why everyone says, oh, the older I get, I turn into my parents, right? It's because the neural pruning of the new networks starts to happen, I think, and then the older ones are still there. And from my experience with transformational coaching, so you have all these certifications that are science-based, and I love how you explain that everything here has actually been studied. It's been scientifically, there's evidence for it. We don't use the word proven in science, but there's evidence for it. And so I want to highlight that, yes, there are so many modalities. I was just thinking about that this morning. I thought, wow, even when I went back to, in my mind, to when I taught medical school, which was not that long ago, I started 2016 and stopped in 2020 because of this interesting time in our lives where we were
Yes.
forced to slow down. And I think it's one of those double-edged swords, but has been extremely healing for a lot of people, because if it
Yes.
wasn't for that, they wouldn't have slowed down. So it's kind
Yes.
of one of these things. But I thought about, if I had mentioned any of this that I'm doing now to anybody in my medical world through whether it was medical school, like if I had shared my soul and really my true deep inner knowing that we're doing something wrong, I would have been kicked out of school. Like there's no
Yeah.
way anybody would have graduated me from medical school. And so when
Yep.
I think back to that, I just think it's mind blowing that we indoctrinate so many people as healers, right? Like our Western world healers, and people don't know these things that we're talking about right now. People don't know these aspects of
Right.
the science that's behind true deep inner mind, body, spirit, emotional, somatic. This is the type of coaching that I do. I support people in being able to actually be with their emotions.
Yep.
Because from the thoughts, sure, we do mindset, but mindset then turns into emotions. And if we can hold them, it only takes 90 seconds to clear an emotion, but we don't take the time to do that. We suppress them
Right.
and we fill under that rug, and we fill and we fill and we fill, and it creates that stress response, right?
Yes.
And then there's the
Absolutely.
unconscious programming, and then there's, the somatic, how it's stored physically in our body.
Yes.
And
Yep.
all of that is evidence-based. Like all of that is scientific. Compassionate self-forgiveness is scientific, forgiving the judgments we have about ourselves, about others. And that is actually healing. And as you said, regenerative.
Absolutely. And I feel that so many people, that was just so beautiful what you were saying, but it's just so many people don't know, but I think there are more and more people looking because, let's take medication, for example. I do not advocate not taking medication. I
Absolutely.
do not advocate just go off your medicine. You don't need them. That
Absolutely.
is not what I'm saying. There are time and place for everything. And for those who may be looking for something to not go on a medication, to perhaps cut down on their medication, and it may be for stress, for anxiety, for depression, even heart medications, even insulin. I mean, I had a client who went off of insulin
Mm,
because she had been able to get into such a heart coherent state and able to really reduce her cortisol, that she worked with her doctor. So she worked with her doctor and a nutritionist,
mm.
and was able to do that through more natural means. And that's what I advocate is through natural means. And I think so many people are looking for how can I think back in 2020 forward, it really brought to the forefront how we have to really be um, the medical system is not going to save us.
The way
We
that it is
we
right now.
The way it is right now,
Yes.
we can only save ourselves, and they can be a good partner.
That's right.
if you can really know about certain things and advocate for yourself. So again, like I said, I don't advocate that, but I really believe that a lot of the things that, I work with or you work with or other people who are in this space with us,
Mhm,
what we really want to do is to be able to help people to get, for myself, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
mhm.
to get into a place where their body is in a homeostasis.
That's right.
So they've got that natural balance and that natural rhythm. So one of the things, for instance, with a heart coherence, when you can get into a coherent heart state, your heart sends more information to the brain. We scientifically know now than the brain sends to the heart. So
Mm.
you think that the brain is the boss or the
Mhm,
dictator, and
mhm,
it's not. It is the heart.
mm,
Think
mm.
about somebody coming into a room that you're in, and you just automatically, before they even kind of get in the room, you're like, that is not somebody that I really want to talk to or be around because they've got a really bad energy. Is
Oh,
because your heart knows. It
mm,
picks up that vibration. We have a electromagnetic field around us
mm.
that can pick up information
Yes,
because as I said earlier, frequency first, and all frequency, and again, this is quantum physics and it's scientifically proven, in we're all energy beings. But
yes,
in every energy and every frequency, there is information.
that's right.
So, you can pick up information from others, but going back to the heart and the brain, when you can get into that heart coherent state, you actually send the heart has direct and indirect pathways to the brain through the vagal nerve and through other ways. And again, is very scientific, but one of the areas of the brain that it directly impacts is your cognitive thinking and higher function thinking.
Mm,
So again, if you can think about a time where you felt more blissful or happy or satisfied or even killed, however you want to put it, think about how you had so much more clarity,
mm,
less brain fog,
mm,
easier to make decisions.
mhm.
So these things that we talk about, it's not just pie in the sky, oh, let's feel good. It affects everyday life and
That's right.
your quality of life.
That's right. That's right. And when you talk about electromagnetic, the heart, this is how it beats. For those that don't really have that scientific background, our heart relies on electromagnetic signals to beat positive and negative poles. And so when you were talking, what came to me was really the way that, like, religion, for example, it is all based on quantum physics. And people always say, science or religion. I'm like, no, it's yes and, like, science and religion. Science proves
Yes,
actually so many things in religious scripture. And so that's why all of the theoretical part of religion, it's all the same in all the religions, right? The
yes,
core behind it, we're saying the same thing. But in different languages and different cultures and different, understandings on how we action those rules or laws of life, really truly the laws of the universe, right? If we get
yes,
down to it.
yeah,
And so I just want to bring it back to something you said about diabetes specifically. So for sort of that non-scientific and people that are listening who might have diabetes, who might be on insulin, when cortisol gets released, cortisol actually stops insulin, which is the chemical that helps sugar get into your cells, which is what everybody gives themselves because their body can't produce or can't use the natural insulin that they've created. So that's why they have to take insulin exogenous from outside of the body. So when we are able to reduce that cortisol, our natural insulin production, as little as it might be, can still actually function for those people who are still producing some insulin. And I believe that when we get out of that state, all of the inflammation in the pancreas, it regenerates, it heals. Our body is meant to
yes,
heal if we give it enough
yes,
time. And so I love that you have that evidence behind what you do, because I think the more we have that, the more we can start to take a different approach in healthcare. And to me, that is the calling. It's a yes and approach, because the way that I always explain it and the way
mhm,
that I see medicine is, if you have a house fire, you're not going to put it out by putting flame resistant boarding into the house. Like, it's burning already. No matter what you throw into it, it's going to burn. However, you have to put out the fire with the medications sometimes,
Yes,
right? And
yes,
then once
absolutely.
you've put out the fire, you can clear all the debris that you can't do anything with, but then you start to rebuild from the foundation up a flame resistant home. And so if there's a little spark somewhere next time, it's not going to cause a house fire, right? It might stay localized in one place, and then you
Mhm.
know how to deal with it. You know how to put that fire out. You have fire extinguishers all over the house where you know how to manage with your mindset, your emotions, even just being able to be vulnerable is so healing. And people just we just don't know that yet. Like we haven't understood it fully. We haven't. That's not true. Way back in ancient traditions, all of these diseases didn't exist, and it's not because of our computers, and it's not because of part of it is our computers because we've become so highly productive thanks to them. But yeah, I just there's so much that we can do in our world right now instead of taking this, oh, it's too late, like we can't do anything now, we just have to, use medications long term, and that's the only option we have. I just really love and appreciate and value so much that science is catching up to ancient wisdom, and
Yes.
we're able to action it in our lifetime. That to me, like it just relieves me so much because we've been doing so much to create stress and separation is one of those causes of inflammation, right? And so that's where it's that double-edged sword of 2020. But I think one thing that we did learn is the necessity to connect, right?
Uh,
The necessity.
Connection, community is key because there are so many people who have felt so lonely. And I love that analogy that you used about the house fire. That's a really great analogy to
Thank
use.
you.
You
Yeah,
know, that you have to take care of the immediate, and that's what I say in a different way, but you have to, there's a place and a time.
that's
So
right.
you maybe have to use the medications right now, and then how do we then give yourself, I call it resourced. How can we resource you
Right.
with tools and techniques or whatever it is to be able to rebuild a foundation that has the fireproofing within it?
That's
And
right.
we're going to always have stress. I don't ever say also that you're not going to have stress because that's not true. Our
Yeah,
life, that's just how it is.
yeah.
The question is, how long do you live there? And
Mhm.
how can you come back to the joy inside of you no matter what is going on outside of you?
That's
And
right.
I don't know if it's okay, but I would love to, just talk about one technique with heart math,
Please.
and
Absolutely.
that's
That is
that's
so
what I love.
generous. Yes.
That's what I love about heart math, as well as some other things that I do, but it's very simple. I don't believe you have to spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a day like a Buddhist monk meditating, because people don't do it. So my thing is what is effective and efficient. So with heart math, we have studied that 15 minutes a day, and it doesn't even have to be contiguous, so it
Mhm.
can be 5, but
Mhm.
15 minutes a day on a consistent basis of practicing some heart-centered breathing can help to increase your emotional intelligence or your resiliency, help you to
Mhm.
increase your resiliency to the situations that happen. So our basic breathing technique is really just slowing your breath down, and I'm gonna actually demonstrate it in just a minute. I'm gonna say it, and then
Absolutely.
how about if we do it together in a
Please.
minute?
Yeah.
So it's just, slowing your breathing down to 5 in, 5 out, and then and then really breathing that through your heart. So there's a lot of breathing techniques out there, and I think they all fit for different uses. There's the ones that are very dramatic,
Mhm.
the breathing
Mhm.
out, and those are good for some things, but for this, it's more of a natural rhythmic breathing.
Okay.
So it's just 5 in, 5 out through your mouth. Get a smile on your face. But imagine that breath going through your heart. Be very, very intentional about that. So just imagine, what I like to do is I imagine the breath as like a um, light array of sparkly sunshine or whatever. And then I like to imagine for myself, this is not heart math, this is me, but when I breathe out anything that I don't want, the darkness, I'm breathing out. So, and this, like I said, is just the basis of any technique that we do. So let's spend just a minute. And you can do this anywhere. You can do this at work. You can do this in a crowd of people. You can do it at home. So just breathe in 5 through your nose, just natural. Out 5 through your mouth. Have a smile on your face. Look at that breath coming into your heart and coming out of your heart. And thoughts may come and they're going to slide by, and you don't resist them or fight them. You just, like a cloud, they're a wisp that are, they're here now and they're gone. Just refocus back on the breath and your heart. And doing this just for 1 minute can help you to reset in that time of chaos. So how was that?
Oh, you know what? I felt my shoulders after about 5 breaths. I felt my shoulders just boom, drop and my body just settle. And it was like, oh, there you are again. Even though I haven't started my morning in stress at all.
Yep.
I, you
Yep.
know, very excited to have this conversation, really looking forward to it. I think I don't live for the most part in a state of, I shouldn't say that. There's a lot going on in the world and in my world. As much as I would like to believe, I do. I say that my life is in flow state and that just like meeting you, it just happened like
Yeah.
very easily.
Yep.
Flow state, when I talk about flow state, is so much in synchronicity. Everything just kind of comes and appears. When the thought comes, the download, as I like to call it, and I action that download and I trust my spirit in where it's guiding me,
Yep.
things always come together by themselves. However, even in that, my physical body is grounded and rooted in stress. It is, as a first generation settler on these lands, I came here when I was 3 in Canada and what we now call Canada. Um, but as that capacity, I always go back to home. To me, has always been like, okay, let's do all the things right now. Like, and I was diagnosed as an adult with ADHD. And so I think if I had these tools throughout my life to know, oh, I can come back to home regardless of what's going on around me. As you said,
Yep.
chaos happens, right? Stress
Yep.
happens, life happens. And I just came from this workshop that I hosted on Friday with a friend that I met online, and it was very synchronistic. We connected and we knew right away we're meant to work to do something together to co-create and offer something into the world. And we didn't even promote this event. We had 30 people show up. Um,
That's fabulous.
and it was just random people off the street that had found it on Eventbrite. And it was such a beautiful healing moment. And the biggest
Mhm.
skeptic at the beginning said, is this a cult? And, we went back to, well, no, it's community. Like that's what we're meant to be in. And, these are people that usually, they're confined within their 4 walls and their roof and their floor. And so being able to be in that space of connection, but even no matter where you come from or what you're doing, as Buddha, Zen-like as you think you are, there's still life and we're still human. And a lot of us are
Absolutely.
in stress, right? In that mechanism to survive. And so this mechanism of this way of breathing and really centering and coming back to ourselves, you can literally do it anywhere. And it's funny
Anywhere.
if this is coming to me, so I'm going to share, and I think it's funny because I wonder to myself, I wonder when I'm going to get a chance to share this. But when we think about constipation and holding, right? It's funny because when I had my son, he was very small. He was 3 or 4 months. I started putting him on the toilet, and I would just breathe, and he would obviously mirror. He would breathe, and he would release everything. And so I've always told my patients too, try breathing.
Yep.
Yes, drink more water, but the breath is connected to our autonomic nervous system. There's fight or flight, but then the sympathetic, but then in the parasympathetic, in the autonomic, we have the rest and digest, and we forget
Yep.
to talk about that in healthcare. It's like we learn
Yes.
about it for one day, and then we just completely dismiss it. And it's like, let's give all of these different medications to force it out. But really, if we come back to home, if we come back to our breath puts us in that state of rest and digest, which moves the gastrointestinal tract, which naturally releases everything. And so,
Yeah, it does. It again, that's bringing our body back into a natural state.
right,
And I think, like you said, what's great about this particular technique is that it can be done anywhere, anytime for a minute. If you sat and did this for 15 minutes a day, your life will change.
that's right. Do it on
I'm
the
telling
toilet.
you.
Do it on the
I
toilet. If
do it.
nowhere else, if you think you have no time, do it
If
on
you
the toilet.
you think you have no time, exactly, exactly. And it's just amazing how you know, that conscious breathing as well as consciously going into our heart. But you can go what 30, 40 days without eating. You can go what, like a week at the most without drinking. You cannot go 5 minutes without breathing.
That's right.
So a lot of people forget your breath is what connects you to life. You're breathing in life
Yes.
when you breathe.
Yes.
And so often our breathing is shifted when we're in that fight or flight.
Mhm.
So coming back and doing something very simple like this, and maybe over time training yourself to do it more, not just when you stop, but even ongoingly. And this is something that I work on. We all continue to work on things, but when I continue to work on it, um, how it makes such a difference in my life.
That's right. Oh, I love that. That is so beautiful. Ah, so nourishing. It is truly deeply nourishing. And the concept of time also is so evasive to me. Like Chronos time makes no sense to me. I feel like when we slow down and when we are present, I truly feel and believe that time slows down somehow.
Absolutely.
And I'm
Absolutely.
still looking for the evidence behind it. And because I know there's going to be our nerdy fellows that love to talk. I always say talk nerdy to me, like let's do this. I love getting into it. But because there's going to be people listening here, I've always wondered about when it comes to our genetics, and this is just something that it's one of those downloads that came to me, and I'm still looking for the evidence behind it. And if there's any geneticists or biochemists or anyone that's out there that's doing this work that wants to provide evidence behind it, this is something that came through and I'm really curious if you know anything about. But when we do healing the way that I know it, through like that somatic, emotional, behavioral, unconscious reprogramming that I do, I recognize that some of us are living out ancestral patterns from way before us.
Mhm.
And so I've also noticed that when I work on my own triggers or traumas or whatever it is that I'm working through, I noticed that I not only shift, the people that are connected to me genetically also shift. And so I believe that our genes are somehow paired kind of like in the same mechanism as Bluetooth, right? They're paired, but outside of our bodies with everyone else that has our genes. And actually, we all have very similar genes that we share as humanity, as animals, we can go into that, kind of another time. But I believe that the more like our genes are, and when we do this kind of work for ourselves, because it all starts with us, we can point the finger, but that's not taking personal responsibility. And so when we have a trigger with a person or we have a relationship that's not working as well as it could be, and when we take that thing and when we do it, when we work on it ourselves, I believe that when we shift our genes, when we do this epigenetic shift, I believe that it also shifts the genes of those around us
Uh,
that are connected to us genetically. And I haven't
Not
heard
only
that anywhere.
connected to us genetically now, but past and
Yes,
future.
that's right.
And there are some studies out there that talk about this, and
Please
this
send
and
them to me.
this definitely is a scientific, because we all are connected.
Yes.
And Dr. William Tiller did some things on this, but there are some other ones also because and that's so I was at a retreat in November, and one of the things that we talked about is it was a very exclusive women's retreat, and what we talked about for the women that were there is why is it so hard for us? And it's because we are the chosen ones to break those generational uh, gaps, to break those generational
Patterns.
traumas, to
Yes.
break whatever, however you want to put it. But we're the chosen ones. But then we have free will to whether we want to do that or not. But
Yeah.
that's why sometimes I feel like it's been so hard that I'm the chosen one to
Yes.
be able to break that.
Yes.
And that's just my belief, and certainly, but there are definitely studies out there that show, I'm trying to think of the phenomenon, but there's a phenomenon out there, because again, in quantum science, where if you have genes that were together, or or atoms, but then you separate them by like thousands of miles, when something happens to one, it happens to the other at the exact same time. There's no
Mm,
delay. There's
mm,
no and it's because one affects the other.
mhm,
Because we used to think that that information or people or things can only move at the speed of light, right?
mhm,
But that's not necessarily true. Again,
mhm.
like I said, frequency has information. So if that both of them have that frequency, um,
Shift.
I'm just trying to think, but basically there is information out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I would
It,
love
it is it is
information
definitely a
inside that.
scientific.
Yeah, maybe we can talk nerdy another time on it because I'm so curious about it. And I know we're coming up to the top of the hour and you
Yes.
have another appointment. So I just want to thank you so, so much. I honor you for trusting your internal calling to shift and, really trusting. We talked about it on the phone, but I'll share it here is that, life is just a mirror of what's going on internally. And so we get little hints from whether you call it God, Mother Nature, the universe, whatever you call that part that connects us all. Um, but it starts as a little whisper, and if we're not attuned, if we're not in line, aligned to our truth, we won't hear the whisper. And so then, we get a piece of rice thrown at us, and we might not feel that. And then there's like a pebble, and then a bigger rock, and then a boulder, and then it's like at some point life will get our attention. And to me, that's how I
Yes.
see chronic disease is that like we've been ignoring because we're so out of alignment with who we truly are and what we believe and our values and our morals and the way that we are here to live our purpose, that with that misalignment, it has to be, and thankfully your case was not interesting to your surgeon. But I just love that you
But
saw
that
as
was my
you did.
boulder.
That was your boulder. Yeah. And so I urge anyone that's listening to recognize the smallest shifts in your energy when you're doing something that doesn't feel quite right, doesn't feel aligned to you. It's okay to say no. Take this as your permission slip to just say no. And it can be about like I just had a post the other day about, it's not you, it's me is the best feeling ever because it's for me. I'm doing this for me.
Yeah.
Has
Yeah.
nothing to do with you. No offense. I
Yep.
can't.
No is a complete sentence.
That's right. That's right. I love it. If there's one thing you could share, and thank you so much for sharing the breathing technique because that I think everybody can take that away and really
Absolutely.
apply it. Worst case scenario on the toilet because we all have to go to the bathroom. But yes, if we can apply it more in our lives, at least 15 minutes, we can start to actually not just stop the disease process, but start to actually regenerate and heal and
Yes.
put
Yes.
time onto the end of our life to extend
Yes.
our life in a way that's actually not extending
Livable.
the disease state, but it's extending wellness state. You get to live a more fruitful, beautiful life.
Yeah.
Um, but is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience with?
You are not broken.
Mm,
There's nothing wrong with you. You are whole and complete who you are. And when you can finally believe that at your core, you're coming home to yourself.
mm, so beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
that moved
so,
me to
so.
tears a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so, so, so much. Absolutely. Oh, thank you for doing this work. Thank you
It
for
was wonderful to be with you. I really am grateful and honored to be here.
thank you so, so much. I know we're going to connect again in the future. I have
Absolutely.
absolutely no doubt. Thank you.
Watch out, world. Here we come.
Absolutely. Have a beautiful rest of your day, Angela. Thank you so
You
much.
too. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks everybody for listening.